Welcome to Porch Play Chats, sponsored by the American Association for the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately titled IPA USA. IPA USA is the USA affiliate of the International Play Association, and as part of our efforts to promote play, we've introduced Porch Play Chats, which are just conversations with people who are just as passionate about play as we are. I'm Deb Lawrence, and I'm president of IPA USA. And with me on the porch is Dr. Sarah Aiono. And Dr. Sarah Aiono is from New Zealand. And so we had to really figure out our timing because what time is it there, Sarah?
It's a very respectable 8 in the morning. So it's lovely.
8 in the morning on Sunday?
It is, yeah.
So just so you know, it's 2:10 in the afternoon in Pennsylvania in the US. So that's why our timing is a little, it was a little tricky. So
it was.
Sarah's an educator, researcher, author, and the CEO of Longworth Education, a New Zealand-based social enterprise committed to transforming teaching through the power of play. With over 2.5 decades of experience in education, Sarah has been at the forefront of advocating for play-based learning that honors the diverse needs of children and supports teachers to implement those developmentally expected, which is another phrase I'm going to steal, evidence-informed practices. I call it, I'm going to have to think about what I call it, but I love the developmentally expected. Her expertise in integrating play pedagogy across different educational contexts has helped numerous schools enhance teacher capabilities, navigate curriculum demands, and build inclusive, engaging learning environments. She's a passionate leader. She works closely with schools and community organizations and policymakers to ensure that play remains a core component of effective teaching. And so learning through play, because we're not doing that so well in US schools. Learning through play all day in New Zealand classrooms, how do we do it, is something that I'm very interested in learning more about. Go,
Thanks.
Sarah.
Yeah. So thank you for having me. And yeah, I'm hugely passionate as a teacher by trade, to make sure that we don't go down the track of taking the joy and the connection and the context and the curiosity and the wonder out of learning. And I think that the Victorian model of education is responsible for doing just that, that we squeeze everything out and we forget how we are naturally wired to learn as a human species. And we know that play, prior to school being invented, was the way that we made sense of the world. And so this is where we work really hard with schools now to ensure that really teachers who particularly know and believe this, we talk about this knowledge to practice gap. We know that there are many teachers out there that know and believe this. The trouble is translating it into practice when we have all these demands placed on us by policymakers, school leaders, parents, what learning should look like versus what we know it is when it comes to children and the way that children learn. So we've got some really quite robust practices now and support offerings to teachers around how we do that.
And so I do find that with, they can tell me everything. This is how children learn. This is what children need to know before they get to kindergarten, which is how to make friends, how to resolve some arguments within their play. But then when they do their schedule, there's no application of play in there at all.
No.
And they have just told me, right?
Yeah.
They've written it down.
Yeah. So and one of the
is this disconnect of what was done to them versus what they're learning, right? That they haven't quite, they can tell me, but they can't apply it yet.
No, and I think it's the same for parents. When schools are looking at maybe doing something a little bit more innovative, a little bit different, one of the biggest worries for school is, what will parents think? Will parents support this because they want these things for their children? And I think what's really important for schools to understand is that we have to take the parents with us as well. We have to educate them, because they also are the ones that will say, but this isn't what we did when I was at school. And I turned out all right. So one of the things we talk about in the support that we offer is particularly, how do we help our parents understand the power of play as well in the learning process?
And I think one of the things that I remember at a parenting workshop, so it was in a program that was very play-based, extremely play-based. They played all day long. But the parents were always questioning, and the director said, okay, I need your help, please come. And I said, okay. So I went there and I said, so tonight we're going to talk about your childhood. And they all looked at me and said, I thought you were going to talk about play. And I said, well, tonight we're going to talk about your childhood. So I want you to think about being 8. And I want you to think about it being summer. And I want you to go back there and I want you to think about where you played. And so everybody was quiet for like 35 seconds. And I said, where were you? And they said, oh, I was in the forest. I was at the beach. I was down the street with friends. I was by the creek. I was, and I said, so what's common about what you just heard? And they said, well, we were outside. I said, yep. And who told you what to play? Well, my friends did. We all agreed. I said, no adult told you what to play? Oh, no, adults, we didn't even know where they were. And we go through all the questions. And then I said, and what's different for your children? And you should have seen them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we work a lot on in New Zealand. And I know, having been into some North American schools, it is a challenge. I know the outside experience for sure. I mean, one of the very basic things we have here is the right to recess, and our children get, several breaks during the day. They get a long lunch break. It's expected. It's part of our culture to be outside and to play. So I know that that's something that we're very proud of here. But we also promote with schools the need for indoor-outdoor flow during contact time. That learning doesn't just happen in the 4 walls of a classroom seated at a desk. That's a made-up way of learning, right? That's the thing that we've created to say this is how learning looks. And it's rubbish. It's not correct. That's not how we've done it. Desks in classrooms were not invented until relatively recently, and yet we've all evolved over many, many hundreds of years. So that's something that I think needs to constantly be challenged. The way that coming back to addressing that gap though, that we found in the research I was involved in, was that teachers actually, in order for us to be able to know what to do in the classroom and to be able to contextualize play to our specific environment too, bearing in mind there's so many classrooms look different. We've got so many different kinds of kids in front of us. Some of us work in really high socioeconomic areas and some in low, and we have different challenges based on where we are, different environmental challenges, community challenges. You can't say one classroom is the same as the next. So how do we help teachers navigate implementing the principles and the knowledge we have about play into their context? It's about creating a set of practices that we know when a teacher is engaging in those practices, the likelihood of the benefits of play will occur. So in other words, if we have a classroom that is enabled for play, so we look at the resources that are available. We look at how the teacher manages the space. We look at, as I said, that indoor-outdoor flow. What decisions has the teacher made to be able to enable children to learn outside as well as inside? How do they manage behaviour? How do they manage noise? How do they manage mess, transitions, pack-ups, all those sorts of things? The nuts and bolts of being a teacher, whether you've got play or not, still apply in a play-based classroom. So we look at those practices. We also, as part of our work we do with teachers, we are in the classroom with the teacher coaching these practices. So in the tool that we use, we have an observation tool that we use called the P block, the play-based learning observation tool. And that tool enables us to observe teachers. We're not in there observing children. Children are the outcome of good teaching practice, right? So we want to be able to observe the teachers and what they do. So in part of that tool, the tool itself has 31 indicators. And part of the tool, we've got 15 indicators that look just at teacher behavior while children are playing. So what are teachers doing while children are playing that support the philosophy, the theoretical underpinning, the learning, the connection to curriculum for children while honouring child-led learning. So this is not the same as playful teaching. This is having children lead their learning, have their inquiries, ask curious questions, engage with the environment as we would want children to do. And then we support the teacher to know what their job is while that's happening. Because I think that's the biggest challenge for teachers. They hear, you know, we shouldn't really interrupt children, we shouldn't interfere, we shouldn't direct children or take over or adulterize play. So teachers kind of go, well, what do I do?
What am I supposed to do? Right. Yeah.
You know, I'm being paid to be here. I've got to look like I'm doing something and being all teachery, you know. So for example, one of my most favorite practices that I like to work with teachers on is spotting the zone of proximal development and observing when children have got to the point where they need a more knowledgeable other, and then helping teachers understand whether that's them or whether it's another child or whether it's the caretaker or the principal or, you know, the International Space Station astronaut that we need to get hold of, because there's a really important question we have to ask about space that no one else knows the answer to. You know, teachers, I think we're so caught up in the things that we have to teach. We don't see those moments where children are asking questions that need answers. And, you know, and our role is to help them know how to find those answers out, not give them the answer, but help them know how to find the answer out. And so that's the power of play. Those questions come up all the time in play. Problems come up all the time. So in our tool, we are looking for, you know, how the teacher supports the zone of proximal development, things like what kind of language are they using with children. We talk about reducing the number of questions that teachers ask. Most of the time, teachers ask low-level questions. And actually they answer their own questions a lot of the time too, which is something that teacher behaviour is quite famous for. So what do we do instead of all this barrage of questions? Well, we make statements, exploration promoting statements, positive descriptive feedback, invitational language. We use naturalistic teaching strategies. So there's all these different terms for behaviour that teachers do to support learning and play without taking over the play, knowing where they are in the space when children are playing and how they can support that. Some of it is even to know when not to be in the play and to step back and just watch and see the learning happen. And that's called being a teacher too.
And I think what you're hitting on is the challenge that, especially here in the States, early childhood educators feel like to be respected as a professional, they have to imitate public school teacher practices. And so, you know, I asked them, what were those practices? Well, you know, we all did the same thing at the same time. And I said, okay, what was another practice? Well, we really couldn't move around much. Okay. And what was another practice? Well, we did lots of worksheets. Okay. How much of those did you enjoy? Like none of them. And I said, then why do you want to imitate that? Right. So there are better ways to be present in a classroom.
And one of the
go ahead.
And so you mentioned a couple of things. First of all, early childhood teachers, we in New Zealand work with children, teachers of children up to the age of 12. So we're working right up to, we call it intermediate, so pre-high school. We're expecting teachers to be implementing these strategies. We'd love to be in high school too. We think that it's important for play to be there as well, but we're not quite there yet. But certainly that we want to bring early childhood practices right up and through our state school system up to, you know, the end of our primary grade or our elementary grade years. But also to, we have in our observation tool a section that we call counterproductive practices.
Oh, I love it.
So we are looking for at least 8 practices that teachers do, and you mentioned worksheets. One of the things that does not have a place in a play-based classroom are worksheets. And there's a fantastic meme that I've seen, and I always throw it up in our workshops that we do. And it's that you would never want to hop in a plane flown by a pilot who learned how to fly through a worksheet, right? And so worksheets are just simply management tools. They are nothing more. There is no rich learning in that. Right. And one of the biggest things we get is, but they like them. But kids like worksheets.
They do
not. I love chocolate. You know, if I had a pantry of chocolate, it wouldn't be good for me, right? You know, there are some children out there that love worksheets because they're nice and safe, right? They're predictable, they're easy, we can do them. Particularly our lovely, darling little girls do them. They colour them in and they bring them to you and say, this is for you, and I love you. And then they got all this lovely, you know, warm fuzzies back, but it does nothing to promote their risk-taking, their creativity, their problem solving, their critical thinking. So our role as teachers is to make sure that we are putting children in a position where they are being challenged, and worksheets don't challenge children. Yeah. So you know, one of the
they color them. They don't do them. They color them.
No.
And now, unfortunately, the worksheets are on the screen. So now they're just flipping through, right?
Yeah.
You know,
it's not even any fine motor skills. So we work in classrooms with teachers where we use a process called practice-based coaching, which came originally from the University of Florida. Patricia Snyder and her colleagues there, who are wonderful and have been wonderful supporters of our work here in New Zealand. And I met the team when I was over at UF briefly, a few years ago now, as I was doing my research. And the practice-based coaching model is a really, really effective model for really honing in on a specific practice that we want to improve in a classroom teacher's day. So if I've got a teacher who knows that they want to have more play in the classroom, they want more child-led learning, but they are feeling the pressure of the curriculum, or they've got a senior leader in the school wanting their literacy data to be improved, then we can problem solve that around how do we teach literacy with play going on, and how do we balance the need for explicit instruction, which has its place in the classroom, with child-led learning, and how do the two coexist rather than it being a one or the other approach. And that, you know, we see when that's happening and happening well in classrooms, that things like literacy and numeracy really, you know, take off in terms of data, because we're not just focusing on one aspect of literacy. We're helping children connect literacy into context, into their play, seeing it meaningfully in their world, rather than, you know, a fragmented approach to just teaching one aspect of learning how to read.
Which is not how we function in a daily, during the day, right? We're always integrating, integrating. And so that, you know, when we're in the primary grade lab that I teach, and where they're in primary grade classrooms and they come to lab, we really talk about the importance of a routine that is flexible, not rigid, follows children's lead, but is also integrated, right? So yes, you have to have blocks of academic time in third grade. Yes, of course you do. But it doesn't have to be worksheets, and it doesn't have to be siloed. It needs to be active. It needs to be integrated. And children need opportunities that once they have completed whatever their task is, that they have an option to play. You
Yeah,
know, they need those breaks in
yeah,
there.
yeah. And we talk about it being a rhythm. So
Mhm.
we the idea here is that teachers are required to, and we have a mandated literacy hour, numeracy hour here. So our teachers are working within mandated expectations as well. And we have the science of learning, structured literacy here at the moment, for better or worse. And we have the expectation that children will engage with explicit instruction of literacy. So they come to a reading group with the teacher. The teacher is teaching them how to decode text. But then those children, when they're finished, they go out into a rich environment where they engage in their own inquiry through play, whatever they want to do, which is literacy, because the noise from the oral language going on is considerably higher than if you're trying to run a quiet classroom. But also too, they're applying what they're learning back out in the play with support from the teacher. So the teacher is in this rhythm of creating this environment where children are engaged in play, bringing in a group and saying, right, I'm going to explicitly instruct here, but then I'm going to move back out into the play and I'm going to see where I'm needed for support in the play. I'm going to model language. I'm going to help children with their research and finding stuff out and problem solving and things like that. And then I'm going to pull my next group. So the rhythm is out in the play, back to a group, out in the play, back to a group. But as you say, flexible enough that if some amazing learning starts happening in the corner related to a project or something that children are doing in their play, then we don't maybe pull those groups. We don't stop that and say, now my reading group is more important than the amazing learning you're just involved in now. You need to stop and come with me, but rather direct the focus in there and know you're going to pick up the reading later at another time. And that's, I think, a big challenge for many teachers, is to break with a rigid timetable and be much more flexible like that.
Well, and I think part of it is because they're not quite sure what they're seeing in some cases.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
What is happening is seen as recreational, like a break from learning, instead of actually understanding that what they're doing is practicing skills that you're wanting them to learn, right? So it's it is this tension with, and in some cases, and I hope not in New Zealand, but here in the States, we just got pre-K, which to me is prenatal all the way through the 4th grade, that they have to take child development. That before then, kindergarten teachers did not need to take child development. And so how in the world could you possibly know what was happening if you didn't have the foundational knowledge of development, right? So it's just crazy.
And
the focus is on math and reading, right? Content, not on development.
No, and equally as children mature, that narrow focus on literacy and numeracy means that teachers don't necessarily know how to see science in play, the social sciences, the arts, health. You know, that one of the challenges we've had here is we've got an amazing curriculum. We had one until our current government started fiddling with it, but our previous government and the work that they did around the curriculum we had really supported this integration in learning. And it, unfortunately, the way that it was rolled out is that the professional development wasn't offered freely to teachers around the curriculum. We moved away from I suppose, a syllabus type curriculum into a whole curriculum. And so teachers didn't get the support to be able to see how learning can be integrated. They were still seeing these subjects in silos. And so we've worked a lot with teachers. We use a process called notice, recognize, respond. And we support teachers to step back. In fact, I've said to one teacher one time, I said, just come and sit down with me for a minute, because she had some amazing play going on. We've been working really hard on getting the resources in there, lots of loose parts, lots of amazing stuff for the kids. And they were playing so wonderfully. and she was very worried about her literacy and numeracy. And I just said, come and sit with me for a minute. I want you to tell me what you can see right now when we look out at the play. What's happening here? And she really struggled, other than to see maybe a bit of oral language and a stretch of maths. And so I started listing what I saw in the curriculum. And the moment that I started pointing it out, and we had the curriculum document in front of us, it was like her glasses changed and she could suddenly see it. And I think that that's what many teachers need is that time to just notice and have someone go, there, that's an example of science. There's some chemistry there. There's some physics there. There's some living world or biology over there, and technology and social sciences and everything. And I think the more practice teachers get at that, the more they see that. And that's one of the things I've been working on a lot with teachers, because I think that while I'm a huge, huge advocate for recognizing the social and emotional benefits of play, and I firmly believe they're the most important things that children should be learning.
Important. Yeah.
Most important. But I don't think they have value in a school system in the way that we see academic subjects. So if we want play to be seen to be valuable, we have to use the language of what's seen as valuable. So in other words, we have to help people go, oh, you know what? We want to increase literacy levels in our schools. Wow, look at what play can do to increase literacy levels. Look at what play can do to increase science. We're worried about our science, or, so let's play that game. If that's the game of what we value, let's show how play supports that too, because we know the benefits of it for social and emotional development. Absolutely. So how do we, this is where I say to schools, if you've got parents who are questioning why you're having more play, and all you're saying to them is, well, it makes them, have better sharing skills, or they learn how to be good friends. There'll be parents out there going, yeah, okay, that's all right, but that's not going to get
them to school, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so you have to help parents see it.
Yeah.
But first teachers have to see it. But then I think it goes back to what we find all the time is that, that's a very interesting opportunity that you gave them as a choice. Why did you do that? Oh, the children like it. And I'm like, no, that is not the answer. Tell me what they're doing when they are actively engaged in this. Oh, well.
So notice and recognize. So notice what they're doing, recognize the learning that's connected to that, and that will inform your response. So if you're seeing that children are, wanting to be outside digging in the garden looking for worms, well, let's look at how we can help them learn all about worms, right? Where are some books on worms? Let's look at some videos. Let's have a song about worms, whatever it is, to support that, and then let them go back and keep playing with the worms, and you gift them the language that they're going to be using as they're investigating worms more. So that's sort of that cycle of notice, recognize, respond that we go round and round and round all the time with. The
Which
other
is really good. Ours is watch, ask, adapt. That's the three that we use is watch what's happening, ask yourself what's happening, and what the children are thinking about, and then adapt your response to whatever it is. So that's what we use, but I like yours too.
Well, the other thing that we help teachers see that I don't think teachers are in, maybe in your system there, but certainly here in New Zealand, we were never trained in this as a elementary school trained teacher, was to understand the schema that children have. And here in New Zealand, we call them the play urges. Thanks to well, I can't take credit for that. My lovely friend Kimberly Crisp coined that phrase, Kimberly and Penny Brownlee here in New Zealand. And the reason they call them the play urges is because they, when we talk about schema, it sounds very cognitive, like children are going, oh, I wonder what happens when I throw these things, right?
Right.
There's an urge. I've got to throw this. This feels good. Keep throwing it, right? Look what happens when I throw it.
I love that. I'm going to tell Beth Edwards about how you reframe that, because I think that is exactly it. It's an internally driven.
We see children
do it.
Well, you know, I often talk to teachers about those kids that just find a hill and want to roll down it. And then they go back up and roll down it again. And the joy and the squeals of laughter, they can't tell you that their brain at that moment has said, hey, actually, I need you to just roll me around in my head a little bit here so I can develop my proprioceptor awareness and my vestibular system more. They're just going, whoa, this feels good. I'm going to do it again, you know.
Again and again.
Yeah, so we talk about the urges and we use those as our data. So if you're, as a teacher, you're watching play and you are getting data, your assessment data is your observation of play and the urges that you see children exploring. That data helps inform how you are going to resource your environment. Because if you've got children who are madly into constructing, then of course you're going to make sure the environment has things for construction. If you've got children who are building enclosures, then you need things for enclosure or transformation, you know, transforming themselves into different things, characters or roles, or transforming things like Play-Doh into a, you know, a character that they've made or a butterfly or something. So, you know, the more, again, I'm using the language of school because then it sounds much more official. I'm getting my assessment data. My assessment data tells me that I have constructors, deconstructors, trajectory, transformation, and rotation in my classroom at the moment. And so that's what I'm going to use to inform the decisions I make about how I resource the environment. Once I've resourced the environment for those play urges, I'm going to see more of it, hopefully. And then I'm going to start looking for the curriculum in that play. And then I'm going to plan how I'm going to teach the curriculum that I'm seeing more in the play by bringing in books, having conversation, gifting language, bringing in artifacts to share with kids, you know, all that kind of thing. So I go round and round in that notice, recognize, respond cycle as a result. So yeah, it's a beautiful, joyous, complex, challenging way of teaching. But certainly the teachers that we work with, once they are really on the way, they say that they could never go back to the way that they were teaching, that they love it. Yeah,
they love it, and they're feeling successful with it because now they're understanding what they're seeing and able to describe it to other people.
Yeah,
that's just beautiful. Oh my God, Sarah, we could talk like this forever. But you have to come back, even if it is 8 a.m. in the morning for you. So any closing thoughts before we end this one, but knowing it won't be the last one, because we have to keep on this, because I think people need practice with it, right?
Yeah, yeah, they do.
I love the playful urges. I'm going to tell that to Beth and Heather Burnt-Santee, whose book is coming out in the fall on schemas, because people, when I talk about play schemas, people still don't get it.
No, I think we heard it briefly at Teachers College, and it was, I often say to teachers that we, you know, when we were training, we heard a lot from about, you know, these old dead guys and young people. We thought, oh, you know, what did they know? And now as a play advocate, I'm such a fan of Vygotsky. I'm such a fan of schema. You know, I just think, man, these guys really knew what they were talking about. And
they did. They were
theorists.
They were hundreds of years ahead of where we are now, right? I mean,
yeah,
I always call them the old dead white guys, except for Montessori.
Yeah, but no, I think the thing to leave your listeners with is, and I'm very aware of the challenges that North American teachers have. I'm doing some work with several districts in Canada, and I understand some of the challenges in the North American and the US continent at the moment. And I just can reassure you that it can be done. I think that's the biggest thing, is that there are teachers who, you know, for whatever context they're in, they just can't see the wood for the trees. And I can absolutely reassure you that children can learn, you can teach curriculum, and they can lead through their own play, and it can be done. So yeah, I'm more than happy to talk more about how that can happen.
I think that is perfect, and a perfect way to end. Don't go anywhere. So to learn more about IPA USA, please visit our website at ipausa.org. And until next time, keep on playing.